This is from The Guardian. Israel court orders end of nationwide strike called over handling of hostage talks.
Israel's first nationwide general strike since October 7th, which was convened in support of a deal to free hostages held in Gaza, has ended after 8 hours with a court order for workers to go back to their jobs. The strike was organized amid widespread public anger at the government's handling of the war in Gaza after the discovery of the bodies of 6 hostages at the weekend. It was called by Israel's largest trade union, Histadrut, from 6 a.m. on Monday, closing government and municipal offices as well as schools and many private businesses. Israel's international airport, Ben Gurion, was reported to have shut down at 8 a.m. local time for 2 hours. The Tel Aviv Labor Court ordered an end to the strike on Monday, ruling that it was publicly motivated and had not been called for economic reasons. The chair of Histadrut, Arnon Bar David, said in a statement before the strike, "I have come to the conclusion that only our intervention can shake those who need to be shaken. The deal is not progressing due to political considerations, and this is unacceptable." The Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich.
I don't even want to say his name, yeah.
The Israeli, I think he doesn't deserve a first name.
He sounds like a fucking demon. Bezalel Smotrich. That is the best villain name I've ever seen.
It looks like smoke.
Bez Smoke
Smoke
you.
Rich.
Smoke Trish.
Smoke Rich.
Smoke Rich.
The Israeli finance minister Smotrich, a far-right leader who opposes a truce in the war, was among those who called on the court to move to ban the strike. The strike action took place after tens of thousands of Israelis took to the streets on Sunday night, cutting off the Ayalon Highway, the motorway running through the heart of Tel Aviv, and lighting fires in the streets. A few dozen police officers tried to contain the protest, but were unable to push it back. Local media reported that 29 people had been arrested. The union called the strike after the Hostages and Missing Families Forum campaign group backed the idea in order to force the government to reach a deal for the return of the remaining hostages taken during Hamas's attack on October 7th. Israel's opposition leader Yair Lapid also supported the move. Were it not for the delays, sabotage, and excuses in the months of mediation efforts, the 6 hostages would likely still be alive, a statement from the group said, referring to the 6 Israeli hostages that were found dozens of meters underground in tunnels during the fighting in Rafah in southern Gaza. The military spokesperson Daniel Hagari said all 6 hostages were abducted alive on the morning of October 7th and brutally murdered by Hamas terrorists shortly before we reached them.
Oh, fucking shit.
As in, we got there right after our bullets reached them.
They bombed them, then they found their bodies. That's what happened. The idea for fucking liars.
I don't think Hamas killed them. What they wouldn't do is they wouldn't shoot their bargaining chip for a ceasefire. Because all they had was them. So.
Yeah.
They're not going to throw that away. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that human life is so, expendable, but nonetheless.
Are valuable to Hamas.
Yes.
So they're not just going to execute hostages. They're going to keep them as an asset to trade with Israel. So they're not just going to kill them. They were bombed. Mm-hmm. And they were bombed.
I don't even think that.
You just think that Israel just straight up shot them?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, you don't put it past them.
I really do.
I feel like if they seen me, they would just shoot me. I feel like they're going to drone my house anytime they want, to be honest, like the way the U.S. treats Israel.
Let's throw this out there now and get it done and over with. I am not suicidal.
I am not currently.
Well, you're supposed to say it so that whenever your body washes up, they don't be like, oh, it was a gas leak. Tipsy. Now, when I drink vodka, I get tipsy. I don't get that. There's something specific about like that fireball, that specific heat in my stomach. I can't. It makes me instant. My stomach tries to turn inside out. It just makes me sick the whole time. And then I won't go through drinking it further until I get to the sedative type or sedative properties, you know?
Having a fire in my tummy just brings back childhood memories.
Oh, man, you ain't see a shrink.
I am an on-call nurse.
Wait, isn't that kind of what I am?
Yeah, you're my handler.
Your handler.
because I'm mentally disabled.
However, the discoveries pointing to Hamas executions did little to deflect widespread fury towards Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition for failing to agree to a U.S.-backed hostage for peace deal with Hamas, which has been on the negotiating table since late May. The longtime Israeli leader has been repeatedly accused of stalling on a ceasefire deal for his own political gain. What kind of piece of shit would do that?
Yeah, he's not a partner for peace. He sabotaged every deal they had. Like Hamas has agreed to 5 different deals, and he keeps changing the conditions of the deal
to make them unagreeable.
To make them unagreeable, of course.
You can't be like, yeah, I agree to a ceasefire, but what that means is you're going to stop shooting us, we're going to keep bombing you, and you're going to bring us hostages, and we already killed yours. That's their idea of peace. That's Netanyahu's idea of peace.
Netanyahu just wants to keep the war going.
Well, now it's just to save his own fucking ass. So
yeah. By the time this comes out, it'll probably be outed, or something different will happen.
Maybe he'll be, swinging from a courtyard or something.
Oof,
I don't know.
Oof.
On a swing set.
On a swing set, guys.
Maybe he'll be on a swing set in a courtyard. They still use ropes to tie swing sets together.
She's not real. I can make her disappear anytime. This is from Haaretz. For 11 months, Israel's boot has mercilessly pressed down on West Bank's neck. Of course, there's terror. Surprise, surprise, violent Palestinian resistance in the West Bank is raising its head. The human monsters have woken up from their slumber and started exploding. Suicide bombers have returned, and the host of Israeli pundits have learned an explanation. It's the Iranian money. Without it, the West Bank would be calm. With it, people are willing to commit suicide just to get their hands on some. It's all the Iranian octopus. How easy is it to attribute everything to Iran? Israelis love doing it. There is a devil, and he's Iranian, and he's to blame for everything. Maybe there is Iranian money, maybe there isn't, but the intensified struggle is the most predictable, understandable development, given what has been taking place in the West Bank for over 11 months of the Gaza war. The only surprise is that it didn't happen sooner. And there's a few headlines here. Israeli army says it carried out airstrike in West Bank. Palestinians report 5 killed. Terror rises as Israel's right fuels the flames. West Bank is on the brink of explosion. West Bank car bombs. IDF says explosives came from same Hebron lab. 6 suspects arrested. Over the 11 months of war, Israel has ripped up the West Bank. Just as it's doing now with the roads in Tulkarm and Jenin, nothing is left of them. This is the hardest period the Palestinians have experienced since Operation Defensive Shield in 2002, even harder since it's taking place in the shadow of another attack, a more barbaric one, in Gaza. In contrast to Defensive Shield, the current assault has no reason or justification. Israel has exploited the war in Gaza to cause turmoil in the West Bank. The response was late in coming, but it now has arrived. The Israeli assault has 2 arms this time, the army and Shin Bet and border police on one hand, and violent settler militias on the other. The 2 arms are coordinated. They don't get in each other's way. Sometimes they blend into each other. When the stormtroopers from the outpost don uniforms, these are the emergency response teams, which grant legitimization to every program. The army takes care not to interfere neither in small nor large incidents. In this context, a statement by a senior military source who warned about settler violence over the weekend expressed unbelievable gall. Jewish terror is causing great damage to security in the West Bank, said the source, whose forces could and should have stopped Jewish terror a long time ago. There has not been a program in which soldiers weren't present and did nothing to stop it. Occasionally they take part in it, and the senior officer dares lament it. October 7th was not just a day of calamity for us, it was one for the Palestinians as well. There are no more words for describing what Israel has wrought in the Gaza Strip, but it didn't hold back in the West Bank either. With the encouragement of the Kahanis cabinet members and the silence of the Prime Minister, other ministers, and the public. This is from the BBC. Extremist settlers rapidly seizing West Bank land. Last October, Palestinian grandmother Aisha Shatea says a man pointed a gun at her head and told her to leave the place she had called home for 50 years. She told the BBC the armed threat was the culmination of an increasingly violent campaign of harassment and intimidation that began in 2021 after an illegal settler outpost was established close to her home in the occupied West Bank. The number of these outposts has risen rapidly in recent years, new BBC analyst shows. There are currently at least 196 across the West Bank, and 29 were set up last year, more than in any previous year. The outposts, which can be farms, clusters of houses, or even groups of caravans, often lack defined boundaries and are illegal under both Israeli and international law. But the BBC World Service has seen documents showing that organizations with close ties to the Israeli government have provided money and land used to establish new illegal outposts. The BBC has also analyzed open source intelligence to examine their proliferation and has investigated the settler who Aisha Shataya says threatened her. Experts say outposts are able to seize large swaths of land more rapidly than settlements and are increasingly linked to violence and harassment towards Palestinian communities. Official figures for the number of outposts do not exist, but BBC I reviewed lists of them and their locations gathered by Israeli anti-settlement watchdogs Peace Now and Kermet Nevat, as well as the Palestinian Authority, which runs the part of the occupied West Bank. We analyzed hundreds of satellite images to verify that outposts had been constructed at these locations and to confirm the year that they were set up. The BBC also checked social media posts, Israeli government publications, and news sources to corroborate this and to show that outposts were still in use. Our analysis suggests almost half, 89 of the 196 outposts, were verified to have been built since 2019. Some of these are linked to growing violence against Palestinian communities in the West Bank. Earlier this year, the British government sanctioned 8 extremist settlers for inciting or perpetuating violence against Palestinians. At least 6 had established or are living on illegal outposts. A former commander of the Israeli army in the West Bank, Avi Mizrahi, says most settlers are law-abiding Israeli citizens, but he does admit the existence of outposts makes violence more likely. Whenever you put outposts illegally in the area, it brings tensions with the Palestinians living in the same area, he says. One of the extremist settlers sanctioned by the UK was Moshe Sharvet, the man Aisha says threatened her at the gunpoint. Both he and the outpost he set up less than 800 meters from Aisha's home were also sanctioned by the US government in March. His outpost was described as a base from which he perpetuates violence against Palestinians. He's made our life hell, Aisha says, who now must live with her son in a town close to Nablus. Outposts lack any official Israeli planning approval, unlike settlements, which are larger, typically urban, Jewish enclaves built throughout the West Bank, legal under Israeli law. Both are considered illegal under international law, which forbids moving a civilian population into an occupied territory, but many settlers living in the West Bank claim that, as Jews, they have a religious and historical connection to the land. Were you part of the original 1948 Zionists that did the Nakba? Is that what you're talking about? In July, the UN's top court, in a landmark opinion, said Israelis should stop all new settlement activity and evacuate all settlers from the occupied Palestinian territory. Israel rejected the opinion as fundamentally wrong and one-sided. Despite outposts having no legal status, there is little evidence that the Israeli government has been trying to prevent their rapid growth in numbers. The BBC has seen new evidence showing how 2 organizations with close ties to the Israeli state have provided money and land used to set up new outposts in the West Bank. One is the World Zionist Organization, an international body founded more than a century ago and instrumental in the establishment of the State of Israel. It had a settlement division responsible for managing large areas of land occupied by Israel since 1967. The division is funded entirely by Israeli public funds and describes itself as an arm of the Israeli state. Contracts obtained by Peace Now and analyzed by the BBC show the settlement division has repeatedly allocated land on which outposts have been built. In the contracts, the WZO forbids the building of any structures and says the land should only be used for grazing or farming, but satellite imagery reveals that in at least 4 cases, illegal outposts were built on it. One of these contracts was signed by Zvi Bar Yosef in 2018. He, like Moshe Shavit, was sanctioned by the UK and US earlier this year for violence and intimidation against Palestinians. We contacted the WZO to ask if they were aware that multiple tracts of land it had allocated for grazing and farming were being used for the construction of legal outposts. It did not respond. We put out questions to Zavir Bar Yosef, but received no reply. The BBC has also uncovered 2 documents revealing that another key settler organization Amana loaned hundreds of thousands of shekels to help establish outposts. In one case, the organization loaned $270,000 to a settler to build greenhouses on an outpost considered illegal under Israeli law. Amana was founded in 1978 and has worked closely with the Israeli government to build settlements throughout the West Bank ever since. But in recent years, there has been growing evidence that Amana also supports outposts. In a recording from a meeting with executives in 2021 leaked by an activist, Amana CEO Ziv Hever can be heard stating that in the last 3 years, one operation we have expanded is the herding farm outposts. Today, the area they control is almost twice the size of built settlements. This year, the Canadian government included Amana in its round of sanctions against individuals and organizations responsible for violent and destabilization actions against Palestinian civilians and their property on the West Bank. The sanctions did not mention outposts. There is also a trend of the Israeli government retroactively legalizing outposts, effectively transforming them into settlements. Last year, for example, the government began the process of legalizing at least 10 outposts and granted at least 6 others full legal status. Gaining control over large areas, often at the expense of Palestinian communities, is a key goal for some settlers who set up and live on outposts, says Hajit Afran of Peace Now. Settlers who live on the hilltop outposts see themselves as protecting lands, and their daily job is to kick out Palestinians from the area, she says. That's genocide. That's human right violation. That's settler colonialism. I mean, could you imagine owning your home for 50 years and someone just at gunpoint takes it away from you? And there's nothing you can do about it.